Roman soldiers weren't just tough fighters, they were master storytellers too. When night fell in those ancient army camps, soldiers huddled around fires sharing spine-chilling tales. From ghostly legions to immortal warriors, these stories kept them awake all night. Let me tell you about the scariest ghost story that haunted Roman soldiers, the Ghost Legion of Teutoburg Forest. Back in 9 CE, 3 entire Roman legions vanished into this dark German forest. We're talking about 20,000 soldiers who walked in and never walked out. The few survivors told stories about pale figures in tattered Roman armor wandering through the trees at night, still trying to find their way home. Soldiers passing through that forest swore they heard phantom battle cries and saw ghostly eagles, the Roman military standards, floating between the trees. The story spread like wildfire through the army camps. Soon, no soldier wanted night duty near any forest. They were convinced those lost legions were still out there, forever marching through the shadows. You think werewolf stories started with Hollywood? The Roman army was sharing wild tales about soldiers turning into wolves way back in ancient times. These guys spent a lot of lonely nights on guard duty, staring at the full moon and jumping at every shadow. They'd whisper about comrades who mysteriously disappeared during their watch, only to return at dawn looking exhausted and covered in scratches. Some soldiers even claimed they saw their fellow guards transform, bones cracking, armor splitting, and human screams turning into howls. The scariest part? If you were on night watch and saw a werewolf, you couldn't leave your post without being executed for desertion. Talk about being stuck between a rock and a hard place. Here's something wild. Losing a legion's eagle standard wasn't just embarrassing, it was straight-up cursed territory. These golden eagles weren't just fancy flags. Soldiers believed they held the soul of their legion. When one got captured or lost, the stories got seriously creepy. Soldiers swore they heard eagle screams in empty camps and saw the shadows of giant birds circling their tents. One famous tale followed the 9th Legion's lost eagle. Every unit that later carried it supposedly met horrible ends. Commanders dropped dead mysteriously, camps got struck by lightning, and soldiers reported being followed by a massive shadow bird. The curse only lifted when the eagle was recovered, usually through some poor soldier's suicide mission. No wonder these guys guarded their standards like their lives depended on it, because they thought they actually did. Let's talk about the original fortune tellers of the Roman army, those crafty veterans who turned campfire watching into an art form. Every night, soldiers gathered around the flames, and that's when the old-timers would start reading signs in the fire. If the flames split in two, that meant the enemy would try to divide their forces. Blue flames, victory was coming. But if the fire suddenly went out, everyone would lose their minds because that meant death was on the horizon. These guys had a whole system: smoke patterns, spark directions, even the way the wood crackled. The best part? Some of these predictions actually came true, probably because these veterans were just really good at reading weather patterns and enemy movements. They just dressed it up with some spooky fire magic to keep things interesting. Here's a story that kept Roman recruits polishing their armor at midnight: the headless centurion. Legend says he was a super strict officer who got decapitated in battle, but apparently, losing his head didn't stop him from doing his job. Soldiers claimed they'd hear the clank of armor during night inspections, and there he'd be, fully armored, perfectly postured, but with nothing above the neck. He'd check their weapons, inspect their armor, and mark violations in his ghostly ledger. The really freaky part? If your equipment wasn't up to standard, soldiers swore you'd hear a hollow, echoing voice listing your failures. Some crafty veterans probably made this up to scare newbies into maintaining their gear, but it sure worked. Let me tell you about the weirdest shopping experience in military history: Mercury's midnight market. Roman soldiers swore that sometimes, late at night, mysterious merchants would show up at camp selling incredible items. These weren't your average peddlers. Their goods would glow faintly, and they'd accept really strange forms of payment, like memories or promises. The soldiers believed these were actually mercury, the god of traders, testing mortals in disguise. The stories always ended with some soldier buying a magical sword that saved their life in the next battle, or getting scammed by a fake Mercury who turned out to be Mars playing a prank. Commanders actually had to make rules about suspicious midnight shopping because too many soldiers were trading their armor for divine trinkets that turned into rocks by morning. Ever heard what kept Roman soldiers awake on Hadrian's Wall? These guys built this massive stone barrier across Britain, but they swore the stones talked back. Soldiers stationed there reported hearing whispers in languages older than Rome itself. They'd tell stories about ancient British spirits who'd slip through the stones at night, leaving mysterious marks that looked like Celtic symbols. Some guards claimed they saw blue-painted warriors walking through solid wall sections, while others reported hearing phantom bagpipes in the dead of night. The really weird part: multiple soldiers across different posts would report the same ghost on the same night. And here's the kicker. Archaeological evidence shows some of those haunted wall sections were built right over ancient British burial grounds. The desert played serious mind games with Roman soldiers. These tough guys who could march 20 miles in full armor would completely lose it when the Egyptian sun started cooking their brains. They'd swear they saw entire phantom cities floating in the air, which, fun fact, is actually a real mirage called Fata Morgana. But it gets better. Soldiers reported seeing giant golden armies marching across the dunes, ancient Egyptian gods having tea parties, I'm not kidding, and oases that disappeared when they got close. The veterans called it desert fever, but the recruits were convinced the Egyptian gods were messing with them. I mean, when you're sweating buckets in the middle of nowhere and suddenly see a floating pyramid, what else are you supposed to think? Ever heard about the Roman army's very own time traveler? Soldiers across different centuries reported meeting the same scout, a guy who knew every battlefield like the back of his hand. He'd show up before major battles, always looking exactly the same. Mid-30s, scar across his left cheek, riding a black horse. Here's the weird part. They found his name in military records spanning 300 years. Some said he was Mars in disguise, checking up on his favorite army. Others thought he was the ghost of Rome's first scout, cursed to serve forever. The craziest story? He supposedly appeared before Julius Caesar, warning him about the Ides of March. Caesar ignored him, and well, we know how that turned out. Ready for the creepiest story that kept Roman soldiers away from caves? Get this. Entire units would supposedly march into cave systems and vanish. But here's where it gets wild. Years later, they'd just pop back up, looking exactly the same age as when they disappeared. One famous story tells of a legion that marched into a Cappadocian cave in 86 CE. When they emerged 3 years later, they thought only a single night had passed. Their torches were still lit, their rations fresh, but the world above had moved on without them. The soldiers swore they'd found an underground Roman city down there, complete with temples and barracks, all trapped in a time bubble. After that, good luck getting any Roman soldier to explore a cave without throwing a rock in first. Thanks for joining me on this spooky journey through ancient Rome's military ghost stories. If you enjoyed these haunting tales, hit that like button and subscribe for more historical mysteries. Share with your friends. They might need these stories for their next campfire.